Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. It's really an honor and a privilege. You have worked as a registered U.S. patent attorney for over 12 years. How is the current COVID-19 situation impacting the legal sector in general, and which are the major changes you've seen in the last few months?
Okay, let's jump into some of the major changes. I think that's kind of really interesting. Um, I think the biggest major change is so many people working from home. So many law firms, lawyers, attorneys, patent attorneys, whether they be prosecutors or even litigators working from home. You know, the patent office itself has always had a strong work from home um, a program. So many examiners, they work at the patent office for a couple of years, about 2 years, and then they go on home. So the patent office itself, as far as reviewing patent applications, really hasn't missed a beat. The federal government may want to take note of that. But I think for the attorneys on the outside, both like I indicated, prosecutors as well as litigators, they've been more, of course, required to work from home for safety reasons. It's wonderful that we can do that. But if you kind of sort of were an old line law firm, um, basically a lot of the files were centrally based in the office. What you'll find is that you may not have access to all the files that you need for a particular case. Well, you know, how do you deal with that? So I think that's a major change that a lot of attorneys have had to get used to. On a personal level, for myself, you know, I started my firm about going on 4 years now. I mean, into our fourth year, going into our fifth. And we purposefully set it up to be more of a digital um, organization, really, both for cost reasons. It's a lot cheaper to do that. So we do keep paper documents, but those are more for backup. A lot of our documents, the cases that we deal with, are on a internet-based server. The internet-based servers, of course, can accept a lot more data than they used to before. I think, you know, we're up to maybe 100 gigabytes of data for all our cases. So now, you know, anytime I need a case, fax in a case, a document in a case, an exhibit, for whatever reason, I can just go onto our server, internet-based remote server, and pull it down onto my local system. So personally, I really haven't noticed that much of a difference.
So it sounds great that you guys were really prepared and working like electronically prior to COVID-19. And your
That's
area of
right.
expertise is intellectual property prosecution. What do you think are the challenges and opportunities the current situation presents to this line of work?
Well, let's start with opportunities, and we can go to threats. You know, I really haven't seen a slowdown in terms of the work. So and in fact, I've seen an uptick. The opportunities, I think, are going to come in the way of the type of technologies that you're looking at. Any technology having to deal with remote learning, any technology having to deal with to make it easier for people to hold interviews remotely, anything in that space that makes it easier for people to be able to be productive, work, whether it be for kids. I have a son, he's now doing all his learning remotely. Any technology in that space, I think, will really see an uptick. And in fact, a lot of the projects that are now new inventions that are now coming across my desk relate to that somehow. In terms of threats, well, I think again, anytime you're in the remote space, it's possible to have your information taken because now that information is being passed over the little internet packets as it goes through the internet space. Well, it is possible for someone to come and grab some of that information down. So technology definitely needs security technology needs to be upticked for people on their personal systems to kind of sort of to make sure that when information is passed from one point remotely to another point, that it's secure, it's not pulled down.
As an IP specialist, you have worked closely with research on the patentability of new inventions from different universities. Have you seen the COVID-19 situation having a financial impact on the research and the development of these inventions and new technologies?
More than likely because researchers are not able to get into their labs. So, you know, I think, you know, anytime you had, I think what COVID-19 has shown, COVID-19 is what it is, right? I mean, it just exists. It doesn't like anyone. It doesn't dislike anyone. It's just here. This is what I do. Get used to me. So if you started off the situation where you were the type of individual or organization that required your people to come in order to do their work, all of a sudden now they can't come in for safety reasons to do their work. Okay, now you face this significant slowdown. So I think that's probably a big area of concern for a lot of universities, because a lot of their work did happen on the university campus. What can a university researcher do in the space of not being able to go to his lab? So you'll probably have something, I would think you'd have, again, here an opportunity, technology that would be able to allow a researcher to perform virtual experiments. Just as a side note, say, for example, a system that has all the different variables that a researcher could possibly use in running the experiment, and then to be able to run it in real time. The variables being merely to mimic what happens in the real world. I would think, that's a significant opportunity, and a lot of universities hopefully would be looking in that space.
Yeah, it definitely seems vital for the future of innovation for the universities to continue their research. And you have experience working in the United States and abroad. How is the COVID-19 situation impacting international collaboration?
Yeah, well, that's the interesting. See, I think international collaboration. Let's take a look at it from the standpoint of meetings, right? Which are so important. People like to get together for meetings. Say, for example, the international arm of the American Intellectual Property Law Association. Well, of course, all those meetings have been called off. The INTA, International Trademark Association, all that a huge event that's met by many. We have many people coming to that event from many different countries. That's all been called off. So there's no collaboration in that sense going on at these meetings, which are so important. As far as collaborations between labs, it depends on where you are. So I have worked in Hong Kong. I have worked in, let's say, for example, Switzerland. A place like Hong Kong was quite used to having to deal with these viruses. I was in Hong Kong many years ago during the bird flu, when the bird flu broke out, as well as SARS, when SARS broke out. So, they had systems in place to kind of sort of deal with it. When you told the local people that they needed to put on a mask, there was no pushback. It was no big deal. And I am in contact with some colleagues there. And so they have been able to kind of sort of kick up their whole research environment more strongly than, let's say, something like the United States.
So you're based in the DC, the American capital. Is there anything else you would like to add that reflects how IP has been impacted by the global reality that we're currently living in?
That reflects it. Well, I think, of course, intellectual property is only as good as it can be enforced. So we do a lot of litigation as well at the federal level. What I see a lot of change coming about, like I indicated, the patent office really hasn't missed a beat because they were used to working remotely. But some of the judges at the federal circuit, it's a different story. They were used to having their hearings for various motions, for example, motion to dismiss. A lot of these hearings were done in person. Well, now we have to do it remotely, telephonically, or via Zoom or Skype or something like that. So having the judges get used to that, having to be able to read counsel's feelings and attitudes during the arguing of a motion, that's kind of sort of been big. So yeah, it's great to hold the intellectual property, but to be able to enforce it is another thing. And being able to enforce it and influence the judge that your IP needs to be enforced in a particular way while doing it on Zoom, maybe that's a challenge that we'll all have to get used to.
Robert, it seems you have experience with working in various countries. If you had 30 seconds or less, what would you say to the American people, to the patent world during this time? What would you say that things would be like looking forward?
We are going to keep creating. There are going to be new technologies and inventions that come out of this. So I would tell anyone in the IP world, whether it be an inventor, to keep planning and creating. I would tell any patent attorneys to make sure you have an eye to the future, that what you are protecting now will be enforceable later on. I don't think we're going to necessarily go back to being in person in the office all the time.